Hey there. Today, I want to talk about what is the perfect lens for using play therapy and expressive arts with children, adolescents, and families. And to me, thinking about this idea of what's the perfect lens, meaning how am I conceptualizing what's going on with my client? That's the lens, the way in which I conceptualize what is going on underneath and activating that behavior or whatever the mental health challenge is that my client is experiencing. So that's what I want to talk about today. So if you're joining me, go ahead and post your name in the comments. I took a couple of weeks off for the holidays. Well, 1 week off for the holidays, and then had to move my oldest son off to college. So I just decided I needed time to focus on that. So so I am back. I'll be starting these weekly live episodes again every Wednesday, 7 a.m. Pacific here in the US, which is 10 a.m. Eastern. And I believe it's still 3 p.m. in the UK, London time. So if you're joining me, go ahead and post your name in the comments. Let's see who's here today. And if you're watching on the replay, go ahead and post your name in the comments. Post a takeaway that you got from today's discussion. And let's get started. So I'll be honest, this is actually connected to one of my favorite topics, which is case conceptualization, because I think it's key to making sure that we are helping our clients. So having a lens that I'm going to look through in order to conceptualize what's going on with my client is really important, because parents are going to bring their child to you, and let's say these are the children with emotion regulation problems. They have meltdowns in the classroom. They won't do what they're supposed to do, or they have a hard time separating from parents, and before they leave the door to go out the door to get in the car so parents can take them to school, or get on the bus or walk, or however it is they get to school, if it's in person these days. They're having meltdowns. They're screaming, they're yelling, or they're saying, I have a stomach ache, I don't feel good, I want to stay home. Or they are at school and they don't have problems going to school, but they are kind of defiant. Or parents are taking them out shopping or out to different functions in the community, and they're clinging desperately to parents because they're terrified of, doesn't make any sense why they're terrified. So many reasons that kids can be struggling to regulate their emotions. And think about it, kids do not like having adults upset with them. They may mask it and say they don't care. Adolescents, well, I don't care. They'll be kind of have attitude. The reality is, and we know this from the lens of understanding neurobiology and attachment, that they do. We're born to be connected. We're born to be in relationship to varying degrees, depending on so many different factors, including personality wiring. We are designed to connect. So this behavior creates a ton of problems for them. It affects their self-esteem, it affects their relationships, it affects their ability to successfully navigate through life's challenges. So parents are bringing them to you for help, and they're looking at you like, can you help? Can you do this? Where do you start? What do you do? What's going on with that behavior? What are you going to do to help them? And even some kids can be a little challenging in the therapy process. How do you handle that? Well, to me, that's the lens. That's the lens that we look at. The lens is the way in which we conceptualize the treatment process. So that's what I want to talk about today. The lens I want to talk about today is using an attachment and neurobiology framework. So if you're joining live, go ahead and post your name in the comments. Let's see who's here. If you're watching on the replay, post your name in the comments. Post a takeaway that you got from this episode. So I'm Kathy Spooner. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and a registered play therapist here in the United States. I have almost 30 years experience working with children, adolescents, and families, including adults. And I love using play therapy and expressive arts. I got introduced to play therapy when I was teaching. I was a special education teacher. I taught in a self-contained classroom. This was back in the 80s for children with emotionally disturbed was the category. I think they still use that category, which always sounds weird to me. I teach special ed, emotionally disturbed children. I wish they would change that category. I hate that category name. Anyway, so I first got introduced to play therapy and expressive arts as a special education teacher in a self-contained classroom. We had a whole center. We had a we had a clinical social worker and a school psychologist. And this was probably in mid to late 80s. And they were learning about this thing called play therapy. And they would bring my kids and do this play therapy thing in their office. And they would be so excited. And they would tell me about this play therapy thing. And they would show me the block creation that my student had created. And I would look at them like, huh? But they were so excited. It made no sense to me. And then the school psychologist started doing play therapy groups with me using Bruno Bettelheim's The Uses of Enchantment, which had just come out back then. So that's an oldie and a goodie if you've never seen that one. And she started co-facilitating play therapy groups with me using the fairy tales. And that moment, that's when I saw the difference in the kids' relationship with me, the difference in their relationship in the classroom, their ability to settle down and actually engage. So to me, I was hooked from that point on because I saw the benefit that using the therapeutic powers of play can have when we're working with children. And 30 years later, I'll include adolescents in that because I've seen it work with them as well. And so that kind of changed my professional trajectory. I went back to graduate school. I took my concentration in social work in child and family welfare because I wanted to work with children. I've always wanted to work with children. And then I could not find anybody who knew how to do this play therapy thing. Now, mind you, it was back before the internet, so it was hard to find things back then. But it was hard, and I had to navigate through it and figure it out. And I'll be honest, it felt horrible, not actually knowing what I was doing. And so then when I finally was able to find somebody, a friend of mine got me connected to play therapy trainings and play therapy supervision. It made a huge difference. And now a lot of the work that I do is focused on helping other mental health professionals working with children, adolescents, and families learn how to effectively use play therapy and expressive arts. And to me, a big part of that is how do you conceptualize? What's the lens you're looking at in order to figure out what the problem is? And that's what I want to talk about. How is using a neuroscience and attachment lens helpful in the work that you do? Why is it so helpful? So one of the reasons that I think it is so helpful is because it helps you, first and foremost, it helps you know what interventions you need to use. What I mean by that is when you are understanding what is at the roots of the behavior, then you know what to target for the treatment change process. So you have to identify the root of it, and using a neuroscience and attachment lens helps you figure out what that root is. So then you can figure out, now you know how the body works and how that's working from an attachment and neuroscience standpoint. You can then figure out what type of interventions you want to use. Do you want to, I mean, that's not all of it. You have other things you want to take into consideration, like the age of the child, how verbal or nonverbal they are, so many other different factors. And those are a lot of the things that we talk about in my supervision group. The thing you want to think about is, if it's, let's say, for example, if it's anxiety, so is it anxiety because of social anxiety, and being around other people kind of shuts down my brain, my neurocircuits kick in, and I say, danger, danger everywhere? Or is it more related to anxiety about just generalized anxiety? And I have all these cognitive distortions going on, and they're activating my anxiety in general. It's still anxiety, two subtle, very different subtle differences. So you're probably going to target a little differently. And what if it's oppositional behavior, where they're defiant, they won't do what anybody says, they're angry, and just kind of cantankerous, so to speak? What's the reason? So let's look at what's going on in their attachment and their neurobiology. Let's say their parents uh, just got told them they were getting divorced. And let's say in this family system, there was a lot of arguing and maybe even some addiction going on. And then now parents are separated, but it's a high conflict divorce, and the child is angry, acting out. That's a very different, if you look at that from a neuroscience and attachment lens, they've just had an experience that's kind of traumatic for them, in that their whole foundation has crumbled because parents got divorced, and it wasn't a very stable foundation to begin with because of the addiction. So we're looking at some attachment issues there. And if we understand neurobiology and attachment and the role that plays in the life of the child, then we understand that the roots of those behaviors are going to require that we take a look at the co-regulation, helping them process the grief and loss issues, those kinds of, the impact of parental separation, the impact of the addiction, understanding addiction, so many different things that if we're using the lens of attachment and neurobiology, then we get a sense of how we're conceptualizing the problem. So then that's going to help us figure out what lens we want to use. The next one, just let me get my banner here. So to me, this is one of the most important reasons for thinking about the lens that you're using to conceptualize behavior and understand where it's coming from. I think when we get kids who are easily overwhelmed and having meltdowns, they can sometimes get the label of being a bad kid, especially if they're defiant and won't do anything, and out in public they're being defiant, or they're going to birthday parties and they are melting down because their friend won't do what they want to do, and they're kind of rigid and controlling. So they can have that stigma of bad, and it's bad behavior. And I think as mental health professionals working with children and adolescents, we want to help understand the neurobiology and the attachment issues going on with that. So it shifts the focus from the bad behavior to curiosity about, so what is causing that behavior? What's the reason that's focusing? Because here's what I know from neuroscience and attachment. I know kids do not want to be bad. I know even adolescents, they may say they don't care. I don't care. You hear that a lot. I don't care. They actually do, because we are wired to connect. And that ability to connect and successfully navigate my day to day life affects my self esteem, my belief about myself, my core beliefs. And I have a couple of trainings coming up. One's in person and one's on demand. One of them is CAPES. CAPES is an acronym for a framework that's neurobiology and attachment focused, using a neurobiology and attachment framework to work with challenging children and adolescents, because we need that framework to help us conceptualize the treatment, as well as how are we going to be in that session with them? How am I going to do my decision making about interventions, and how am I going to talk to parents, and what's going on, and where are they in the treatment process? So if I use a lens of neuroscience and attachment, that gives me some information about how I want to navigate through the treatment process with my client. And I'm taking the focus away from the bad behavior to what's going on in the roots. That's going to help me figure out what my interventions are going to be. I'm going to use play therapy and expressive arts, because I know for children, even adolescents, that can help them go to a deeper level in the change process. So a lot of the trainings that I do, and especially the CAPES training, a framework for using play therapy with challenging children and teens, that one I go into a lot of the neurobiology and attachment surrounding emotions and emotion regulation, the importance of co-regulation, and then how do we integrate play therapy interventions? What kind of play therapy interventions can we use to help that child? So if I'm using a neuroscience and attachment lens, then I understand what are the roots of the behavior. I'm conceptualizing what the problem is so I can figure out what interventions to use. I can shift the focus away from the bad behavior to being curious about what's going on, and getting really at the root of the issue rather than focused on the external behavior. I want to go to the root. So I want to figure out what I need to do in the treatment process to get at that root of the behavior. And then the third thing is helping parents engage as co-regulators in the change process. If I use a neuroscience and attachment lens, first and foremost, I'm going to understand why it's important parents are co-regulators, because children are laying down those neural pathways for emotion regulation. They need their parents. They need the adults in the school. They need the adults in their lives to regulate their own emotions in the moment so that they can help the child regulate their emotions during their emotional storm. They need our help. To me, we kind of expect that if I teach a coping skill to an 8-year-old, that the 8-year-old is going to be able to use that coping skill in the moment when they're wigging out in their emotional storm. It's not even realistic, because if it's more of they need adults to help them through that emotional storm to co-regulate. So if I use a neuroscience and attachment lens, then I already understand that that's how it works. And then I can help parents understand their role as co regulators and kind of skills coaches, um, And there are a lot of different ways to integrate parents in to the play therapy process. I need to understand how that co-regulation works, so, and why it's important, so then I can explain that to parents, because we're having to develop relationship with parents as much as we're having to develop relationship with our child and adolescent clients. We need to engage the family, the parents, the our client that's coming in. I also am a big fan of family play therapy. So I like getting in other family members as well, so I could see the whole dynamic in the home and where how things are working, figuring out strengths as well as things that need to change. So I need to explain to parents how co-regulation works and how that's important. And also, because now I have this lens of attachment and play therapy, attachment and neuroscience, I can use the play therapy to um, help with to create those for the interventions. And how am I going to integrate parents into the treatment process? Are they going to be more skills coaches and then we're going to bring them in at the end? Are we going to do parent child whole sessions? Am I going to meet one on one with parents to do some parent coaching and skills coaching? I'm probably going to do all of those. To be honest, that's how I do it. So there are any number of ways, and my lens is the way in which I conceptualize that to help my clients get through the treatment process, master those strong emotions, and help parents understand the importance of their role in helping their child. And for those of you in a school setting, I would say this is your role. You're the co-regulator in the school system, helping the other teachers. I know sometimes teachers can be a little overwhelmed, and so having to deal with yet another thing in the classroom can feel a little overwhelming for them. As a school social worker or a school counselor or a mental health school-based therapist, I think one of the things, if we use a neuroscience and attachment lens, we can help the school staff, principals, vice principals, we can help them understand, actually, if we use this lens and we use these different strategies, it's actually going to make your life easier, and you're going to be able to educate that child much more effectively. So I think even in this lens helps across a variety of settings, and mostly helps us figure out what kind of interventions we need, because now we're understanding the roots of the behavior and how the adults can help these children. So, just as a recap, using a neuroscience and attachment lens really helps to understand the neurobiology underneath the behavior, which is going to help me figure out what kind of play therapy interventions and expressive arts interventions I need to use. One of the ways, so I have the CAPES training that's coming up in February, that I use a neuroscience and attachment lens for that. And we go through the how that all works and how to apply the play therapy interventions. We'll do some play therapy interventions. We'll talk about the CAPES framework. And I also have another course. It's the expressive arts with adolescents in play therapy. I think adolescents, what is it? Expressive arts in play therapy with adolescents. It's my first day back doing the lives. I'm a little rusty. So, in that one of the things that we look at using a neuro, okay, so I'm about to nerd out a second too, because I love both of these trainings for helping to understand neuroscience and attachment and how to use that effectively in the play therapy process. So one of the things that we want to look at with adolescents, and we understand neurobiology, emotion regulation, mind-body connection, and attachment, where do those core beliefs come from? The core beliefs activating the behavior. So we can target the behavior or we can target the core belief, and we can help our clients understand how these core beliefs are influencing their emotions and their behaviors and their relationships, and then help them using some expressive arts activities in the play therapy process to challenge and change and use some mindfulness based coping skills. All of those things, we use that neuroscience and attachment lens, and that helps to guide the treatment process. So I'm really excited about those trainings. I'll tell you a little bit more about those at the end. And understanding the neuroscience and attachment helps us to know what interventions we want to use. The other thing is, I'm using a neuroscience and attachment lens helps to shift the focus that we're seeing bad behavior, helps kids shift the focus of I'm bad, helps parents shift the focus of, oh, I have this demon child, or my child is bad, or oh, help me, I don't know what to do. Helps them understand and be more curious about what's going on. What are the roots of that? If we understand emotion regulation and how that works, then we're looking at the mind is the boss of the body. So how do we support that change instead of focusing on the bad behavior? So and that in and of itself helps take a lot of the stigma out of the behavior and helps the child not feel so shame-based, helps parents feel more empowered. And then the third thing is, using a neuroscience and attachment lens helps parents understand their role as co-regulators, helps school staff understand their role as co-regulators for children in the school setting. So that is it for today. And if you find this helpful, please like and share it across your social media. I go live every Wednesday on LinkedIn, in my private Facebook group, Play Therapy and Expressive Arts Playground, and on YouTube. I do have all of my live episodes, all the replays are on my YouTube channel. So if you're interested in some of my other live episodes and you want to watch some of the replays, you can head over there to my YouTube channel, watch some of those. I did a whole series on case conceptualization and how that is beneficial in the play therapy process. So like and just go ahead and like my YouTube channel, subscribe to it so you don't miss any episodes. And if you're interested, I have 2 trainings coming up. One of them is the CAPES training, framework using play therapy with challenging children and teens. That's a full day training. It's a hybrid version. So you can attend in person in beautiful Southern Utah, St. George, Utah, on the campus of Dixie State University. Utah is so beautiful. Or you can do the virtual online. It's going to be Saturday, February 5th. The other training this is an on-demand, so you can take this one anytime, anywhere. It's using expressive arts and play therapy with adolescents. I use a neuroscience and attachment lens in both of these trainings. CEs are available. And if you are interested, you can head over to my website. On the courses page, the trainings are listed there. You can find out more information about them to see if they're going to be useful in the work that you're doing with children, adolescents, and families. So my website is rrhcounseling.com/courses is where you will find the trainings. And I will see you next week. Bye for now.